Welcome back, everyone. Rabbi Nathan Zaboulani here, learning with you the Perush of Rabbenu Avraham ben Harambam on Parashat Miketz. Today, we will be studying the unsolicited advice that Yosef gave. We all know that Paro has a dream. Very troubled by the dream, he seeks an interpretation. Yosef is brought to provide that interpretation. And after providing the interpretation of the dream, which embedded in it had a big problem, that there was going to be famine in the land of Egypt, Yosef also provides not just the interpretation, but also a solution to the problem. And here we see in the Pasuk that Yosef advises that you should take from the plenty and save it for when there will be ra'av, when there will be famine in the land. And the land should not be destroyed because of the famine. Yosef provides a solution. Now you might say to yourself, of course he's going to provide a solution. But Rabbenu Avraham points out that this is for sure not an of course situation. No one asked him for his advice on how to solve this problem. They asked him for an interpretation, not for a solution. And the fact that Yosef is giving solutions when he's not asked is davar meguneh. It is inappropriate. In general, we all know in society, no one likes a person who goes over to people and gives unsolicited advice at inappropriate times when we don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear a solution right now, and I definitely don't want to hear a solution from you. I didn't ask you. In this case, it's even worse. Especially when Yosef, who is a nobody, just jumped out of jail, is speaking in front of kings and important individuals. Who is he to give advice? What was prompting him? What was going on with Yosef in his mind that he felt it was appropriate to give advice to the solution? And Rabbeinu Avraham elaborates and explains Yosef's reasoning, his internal moral compass. He was not asked. No one expected this from him, and it was in fact unpolite to do so. Yosef did this because he had rahmanut. He had compassion on the people of Egypt. He wanted to fix the situation, to provide a solution for the tremendous suffering that they may incur in the future. He was concerned that maybe Paro and his sarim may not have come to the proper solution that he had for them. Maybe they weren't intelligent enough, or maybe they didn't care about the people. Yosef cared, he had compassion for the people, and he was compelled to provide a solution to the catastrophe that he had just forecasted. This idea of rahmanut is very clear in the actions of Yosef, says Rabbeinu Avraham ben Harambam. Now, on this topic of rahmanut, felt it appropriate we should learn Sefer Hamaspik Le'ovdei Hashem, his book on Musar and Hashkafa and philosophy, in which he elaborates. He has a whole chapter, chapter 4, on the topic of rahmanut, and he says, Rahmanut, this compassion, this quality, this characteristics. This is one of the purposes of the Torah. Do not think that this is just some quality, just some characteristic. This is one of the qualities that the Torah is coming to teach and to embed in us. In fact, out of all of the qualities which are kivyachol associated, attributed to Borei Olam, the first one is Rahmanut. El Rahum. ועוד פעם חזרה התורה על זה, כי אל רחום השם אלוקיך, והנביאים אמרו, כי אתה אל חנון ורחום. This idea that God is Rahum comes up all over in the Torah, and our Chachamim teach us, Ma hu Rahum, af ata ye Rahum. Just like he is Rahman, he is compassionate, so to you, human beings, his people, his children, should be compassionate. In fact, the Torah wanted to inspire in us this rahmanut, this compassion, and therefore, it gave us many mitzvot. All the mitzvot that deal with us supporting the poor, and to provide the pikadon, that collateral in which the ani, the poor person, gave you. No, give it back. This is all preparing you, to train you to become more compassionate. In fact, Borei Olam forbade for us this quality of achzariyut, of cruelty. Don't hold back your heart. Don't close your heart. Have compassion on the people. The Torah even tries to stir up compassion in you. It says, what is the poor person going to sleep with at night if you keep the collateral which he gave you? Look how the Torah uses language to inspire us to be more compassionate. And here what we're seeing, Rabbenu Avraham teaches us that the purposes of many mitzvot in the Torah, his father also, Harambam, discusses this in Moreh Nevuchim, that many of the mitzvot that we have in the Torah are to train us to take away our embedded natural cruelty, which we all have within us, and to gear us, to steer us more towards a lifestyle of compassion. Now, this all sounds very simple, almost very obvious, but here we're going to see that it really is not so simple. There is a balance within the spectrum of compassion, rahmanut, and achzariyut, this cruelty. A person should not be achzar, cruel, but he also should not be too compassionate. What does that mean, too compassionate? How could a person be too compassionate? Here we see the words of Rambam in Hilchot De'ot, in which Rambam spends a lot of time explaining to us the derech ha'emtza'i, the middle path of not being extreme in any of the qualities. We see it elaborated in the words of his son Rabbeinu Avraham, in which he says that there are some people who are too rahmanim, they are too over compassionate. That there are people who are so compassionate, quote unquote, that they have these feelings of compassion even for a chicken that is being slaughtered for the purposes of food and eat and benefit. No, what are you being overly compassionate about? This is not appropriate. We should stay further away from cruelty and slightly tilt ourselves towards the compassionate. But a person shouldn't be overly cruel. A person should not be overly compassionate. That is, in fact, inappropriate. Rather, we should be compassionate to those who are deserving or of need of our compassion. A person who falls, to help him in his despair. A person who's being abused, a person who's being taken advantage of, to protect him against he who is taking advantage of him. To feed those who are hungry, and to clothe those who are naked, and all the similar. Those are people, those are scenarios in which we should have rahmanut, compassion on them. And he goes into a whole section of this chapter, rahmanut she'enena nechona. There are types of compassion which is not appropriate. And I'm not going to go into the entire detail of it, but he explains how there are people that we should not be compassionate for. For example, murderers, people who sin, people who do terrible and evil things. Compassion for such individuals is inappropriate. It is an extreme within the spectrum of compassion and cruelty, which Rabbeinu Avraham teaches us is not appropriate, is not the proper way. In fact, we understand here that every single midah can be taken to an extreme, to an inappropriate extreme. And our responsibility is to be more on the side of compassion. We should be cruel to those who are deserving of cruelty. We should be compassionate to those who are deserving of our compassion, which is a very, very large group, as Rabbeinu Avraham explains. These ideas are certainly iterated in the Gemara by our Chachamim. As it says in Masechet Yevamot, there are 3 signs in this nation of Am Yisrael. We are people that are compassionate. In Masechet Betzah it says, anyone who's compassionate for God's creations. Biyadua, it is obvious, it is known. Shehu mizar'o shel Avraham Avinu. You can identify this individual with a descendant of Abraham Avinu. From Rabbeinu Avraham, from Yosef, from our Chachamim, we learn the importance of compassion, but compassion without extremes. Compassion as opposed to cruelty. Compassion in the right times. Compassion that Yosef had in our Parasha for the innocent, good people of Egypt who did nothing wrong, who were about to come off a terrible famine, And Yosef, in his compassion, stood up, spoke out of place, interrupted the king, and provided a solution when he was not asked, out of compassion for the people. Have a great Shabbat. See you next week. Parashat Vayigash with TanachStudy.com.